Remember, a rhetorical précis is a 4-sentence, highly stylized rhetorical analysis of a piece. It examines it 4 different ways: the what, the how, the why, and the who. So let's take a look at one. If you haven't already done it, read the transaction from William Zinsser's on Writing Well, and then see how I did with my rhetorical précis. Okay, the first sentence is the what. Let's go ahead and read it and see if I have all the elements. In his opening chapter of the transaction on Writing Well, 1994, William Zinsser, Yale professor and freelance writer, asserts that writing is a personal transaction between writer and reader, and that the principles of good writing can be learned. All right, so on your rubric, it's going to say, did you have sentence 1, the what? Does it contain the author? Yep. The title of the work? Yes. And I want you to notice that the title of an essay from a bigger work is in quotation marks, and that the title of the publication is italicized and in this case, within the parentheses. But you always put in parentheses the larger work, and the smaller piece is always in quotation marks. So if I have an album and a song from an album, the song will be in quotation marks, the album will be italicized. If I have a magazine and an article from a magazine, the article will be in quotation marks, the title of the magazine will be in italics. It's always done that way. Okay, so do I also have a rhetorically accurate verb? Yep, he asserts. And you notice that I did a little bit of research to figure out who he was and just add a little bit of detail to this that maybe it was not in the essay itself. And then do I have a clause that follows that tells what is the major claim or the thesis, and if there is a secondary prong to that thesis, do I have both of those? And the answer is yes. So I would say that I did an okay job. Sentence 2 is the how, and often this sentence is the longest sentence in a précis because what it's going to do is rhetorically analyze the structure of the writing. Its job is to show the techniques that the writer uses to prove the thesis. So let's take a look at this and see how well I did. Zinsser offers a series of anecdotes contrasting his own style of writing and rewriting, often in isolation, to fellow author Dr. Brock, who lets it all hang out and believes writing is easy and enjoyable and collaborative. Then he argues there isn't any right way to do intensely personal work before using a series of quotations which probe the writer's motivations. Let's take this apart a little bit. So the first thing that you'll see is that I sneak in this semicolon. So we use a semicolon to connect 2 complete sentences, not joined by a fanboy, for and nor, but, or, yet, or so. We use that semicolon because the thought isn't complete yet, but if I continue writing, it's the sentence is going to get unruly. So we join 2 sentences when the second sentence is further explaining the first, because we use a termination mark, this period at the end, to say that the sentence is done, the thought is done. Okay, so if you notice, there are 3 different ways that I identified that Zinsser is setting up this argument. He sets up this compare and contrast between himself and Dr. Bach, and then he shows himself as someone who really agonizes with writing in contrast to Dr. Bach, who seems to find it enjoyable and collaborative. And then he talks about that there isn't a right way, that Dr. Brock's way is right, that his way is right, and then finally he ends with a series of questions that leads finally to the thesis statement. So, do I have a sentence that explains how the author develops and supports the major claim? And did I cite the text for clarity? The answer is yes, and so therefore I would be a target for that. Sentence 3 is our exigency. Now, lots of people don't. So when we think about exigency, we want to think about, why is this piece being written or delivered to this audience at this time? What should we know about the time period? Is there anything specific about the historical context of the time that this is being written? And in this case, that's not relevant, but it might be if we're talking about a speech given as a eulogy for someone. What is the compelling motivation which requires this piece to be written or spoken at this time for this audience? Always thinking about this. Now, lots of times I find that kids are way too general when they write these. So exigency is relevant to time and place. If your line of reasoning could be used for any piece at any time, then it's not specific enough. What that means. So let's take a minute and talk about it. Exigency is the why. Okay, it's why is this piece being written at this time and for this audience. The opening chapter to a book on writing well, the essay welcomes all types of writers into the process in order to focus on specifics of effective writing. Now, this is a good sentence. It tells me why it's being written, but one thing that I would be correcting on this is, let's take a look at that. It's the title of a book, so that should be italicized. Sentence 4 is the who, and let's take a look at that. He writes to all writers, from beginning composition students who might sit in his lectures to professional writers who look to sharpen their technique. Simple and sweet. All right, so do I address the intended audience of the text, both immediate and secondary audience? Now, secondary audience might be us, right? You know, it's still relevant to us, but in this case, I think I do. Is it specific and consider the exigency from sentence 3? The final thing that I want you to be aware of is you must have a work cited, and it must be properly cited in order to be at target. So you have to include the title of the magazine, and the publication is italicized. The title of the article is in quotation marks. So if you look at the rubric, it spells that out. Make sure you're paying attention to that. So here is my citation. If it all fits on a single line, I don't need to indent. But if it does not fit on a single line, then I need to indent any subsequent lines 5 spaces. If it's not done that way, then it will be incorrect. It begins with your author's last name and then first name and a period. You want to consider these as containers, and they contain the major elements of the writing. So I have a container for the author, a container for the title of the article is in quotation marks, the title of the book is in italics, the publisher, the year it was published, and the page numbers. Now, if it's a website, you need to include the URL. Oftentimes you're also asked to include whether it's an online or a print version. All right. Make sure your citation is correct. Of all the types of writing that we do in composition class, one of the most widely used in other disciplines is this rhetorical précis, because you have the ability to quickly read a piece and then analyze it for its content. You analyze it for the what, the how, the why, and the who, and it's a very useful tool. So we will write 2 of these précis. The very first one you will write over the F word and upload it to Canvas for peer editing. Once you get your feedback, you don't need to do anything else with that one. Even if it's not at target, that's okay, because you're going to write a second one over black men in public spaces and upload it to Canvas for instructor review. If that particular piece is not at target, then you'll want to either revise based on the comments that you receive, or try a third one over mother tongue.